Hey, deserving listeners, recently I did a poll on YouTube asking y'all which couple I should watch next. And by far, the most voted for couple was Deavan and Jihoon. So I'm going to watch this couple. Let's watch it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. I'm going to react to it. Let's see if anything interesting comes out of my face.
저는 솔직히 먹을 수는 있어요. 근데 저희 부모님은 좀 아무래도 드라실러를 처음 봤으니까 좀 그게 무리가 됐다고 저는 생각을 해요. Drusilla, we need to Drusilla got a manner.
She has manners.
Yeah.
She says please and thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I haven't reacted to anything up until this point because there wasn't really much to say. It was interesting to watch, but there wasn't much for me to say. But I will comment on this scene. There's a lot to catch up on. One issue, well, let's talk about the positives first off. The parent, often when we have, particularly the American parents, when they go to another country and they partake in the food of the other culture, the Americans will usually say it's disgusting. We can think of Libby's family like this, putting them down. And Jihoon's parents are up for anything. They're like, oh, okay. They didn't know what bacon was, apparently. They're just like, oh, is this pork belly? And it is, or, it's pork-based, right? And they didn't know that you're not supposed to eat it prior to being cooked. And they liked it, I believe bacon is cured, right? So it's basically okay to eat before you fry it up. I don't know. I'm not a cook person. But anyway, the parents ate the raw bacon and were like, okay, it's good. And that's a strength. That means that you are open. It means that you, at the very least, aren't going to insult your host. Deavan really wants to make an American-style breakfast, and she doesn't seem to be very organized. The first thing I'll say about Deavan is that she seems a little, what do I say, kind of spacey a little bit. Now, what does that mean? Well, some people are they're kind of spacey, and there's nothing wrong with that. I had friends that I grew up with who were kind of spacey, and they're wonderful people, smart people. They were very good at long-distance running. I don't know if that's a correlation or an association brain-wise, but I found that, long-distance running, like 10K, marathons, this kind of thing. And I always wondered if it's because they're just so mellow that running doesn't bother them. Because for me, I'm like kind of the opposite of mellow. And as soon as I run and feel the pain of running, I instantly just want to stop. I'm just like, I can't do this. I'll do anything else except for this. Anyway, my point is that Deavan seems to have that kind of personality. I don't know. I'll keep track of that as we move forward. And then we see with the daughter, Drusilla, they're presenting, at least on the show, that she is kind of rambunctious. Now, I think she's about 2.5 maybe. And, it's normal for kids to be very rambunctious and very active. But there's a question. Is Drusilla on the ADHD spectrum? It's really hard to diagnose kids at this age, particularly based on the information we've seen on the show. And people throw around that label way too often anyway, especially with kids that are difficult to manage. Or are we looking at a parenting thing where Deavan hasn't established a very good boundary for the child? Now, it's really hard with very young children to establish boundaries. They don't learn very fast. They have a lot of impulses. They don't really understand things. And so to some extent, with kids of this age, it's a matter of distracting them. So I don't know, but what I would have done with Drusilla, given that she's active and she wants to be a part of the action, one, I wouldn't have her up on the table because she could hurt herself, but also she's like rummaging through the food with her hands like a wild child. I would give her something that she enjoys to do, like a game or drawing or something on the floor, a ball, something that keeps her entertained, because you can't just tell a kid to sit quietly, particularly when they're in those active hours of the day. So, and we've seen some scenes already, and I don't know if they're just editing it this way, where Deavan seems to be extremely passive when it comes to parenting. Well, I wouldn't say extremely passive. Let's just say on the passive spectrum, meaning that, hands off, not very reactive. There was a scene I didn't react to where Drusilla actually got up on to the counter when at Devan's home with the parents. And I'm thinking, whoa, because this kid is standing on the counter. First off, she could hurt herself. Second off, she could break something. She is going up. She's opening up a cabinet that has glass doors. Now, maybe they're plexiglass. But she starts pulling out dishes. And I thought, well, okay. Every step of the way, I'm like, well, Devan's going to react to this one. And Devan's sitting right there. Like, if I'm Devan, Drusilla is right here on the table. So I'm thinking, well, okay, surely Devan's going to say, okay, honey, let's get down. But she reaches into the cabinet. I think, okay, well, here's the line that Devan's going to draw. No, the child pulls out some dishes and starts throwing them and throws it right across Devan's face. And Devan didn't even really react that much to that. She's like, whoa, what's going on? Again, seemingly not processing things in the intensity that you would hope that someone would, particularly a parent. So I don't know what's going on there, or they're just showing us little clips of things to make us feel a certain way. I'm certainly not going to be one of those people that calls out parents. Parents are already shamed enough. We might, and I, as a therapist who actually would go into homes and actually help parents, I can tell you that parenting is very difficult, particularly when you have a hyperactive, rambunctious child who wants to get in everything. And it's very easy to shame the parents, say, you're doing something wrong, when if you were in their shoes, you would realize that it's really hard. There's this general sort of simplistic assumption in society that all children are the same. And if you parent in a good way to the kids, then all the kids will be the same and will be well behaved and that sort of thing. And that is not true. Kids come out of the womb with different dispositions. Some kids are very active. Some are not as active. Some kids are kind of mischievous when as soon as and you've seen it, like if you have interacted with that children, you'll see like, wow, that 9-month-old is already a little mischievous. And then that personality trait persists throughout their life. So it's easy to judge the parents, and I don't want to participate in that. But I am going to comment on that a little bit. There was also this scene that I didn't show where Jihoon wanted to sleep in Devan's bed. Jihoon is actually, and the family are coming to Utah, to Salt Lake City, and Jihoon wanted to sleep in the bed with Devan. And Devan's like, no, she sleeps in the bed with us. She doesn't sleep in another bed. She's always slept with us. And Jihoon was surprised, and he said, in American movies, when I watch American movies, they always have the children in a different room. So I thought that's what we were going to do. And this highlights another example of how people, when they marry people from extremely different cultures, Korean culture, South Korean culture, and the culture of Utah is extremely different. And so they always seem to be a little surprised that they're bumping up against differences. They're like, oh, I thought it was going to be this way. And I'm always thinking, why did you think it was going to be that way? You're completely different. You're in completely different cultures. But anyway, so it's very common for children to sleep in the bed. And Devan said, well, what we need, if we're going to have sex, we have to go to a different room or something like that. But the other thing is Devan is 7 months pregnant. Not that you can't have sex when you're 7 months pregnant. You certainly can. But I don't know. Jihoon just seems to be also a little out of it, also a little not recognizing the intensity of the situation, not realizing all the factors involved in what's happening right now. I don't know. Jihoon seems to have kind of a childish nature to him. I'm not really quite sure if that's true. It's also tempting to think that when people are struggling with English. I'm a native English speaker, and when I hear someone struggling with English, there's this heuristic that we have. It's like, oh, you must be a child, when in reality, if you heard them in their native language, they don't sound that way at all. They sound extremely fluent and intelligent. So I don't want to make that bias. I don't want to succumb to that bias as well. But anyway, so let's continue watching.
좀 이렇게 어떻게
활동적인 거지.
너무나
동적인 거.
활동적이라.
Again, you have to give her something that entertains her. You can't just expect her to entertain herself. They're in an Airbnb. She doesn't have her toys around, and she's getting bored, and that's normal. So I wonder if there was some attempt to entertain Drusilla. Now, if I were Deavan and I was like, okay, well, I really want to make this American style dinner, okay, or a breakfast. So how am I going to manage Drusilla? Well, how about I ask Jihoon, look, the two of you play with this game and try to keep her entertained, or something along those lines, or maybe she goes outside and plays on the swing or something that will be entertaining for her. To expect, and I've seen this before in parents when I would go into the homes. Parents would vacillate between these two states where they'd be basically ignoring the child because they're overwhelmed or they're just too involved in what they're trying to get done, or they can only do one thing at a time, which Deavan might be a candidate for, I'm not quite sure. So they'll go from just like ignoring the child to when the child does something really terrible, that's when they turn on the child. They're just like, and the child is confused because the child is just a bundle of impulses, and then all of a sudden, and they're having all this fun and and all of a sudden, boom, their parents are in their face. And like, whoa, what's happening? And it can be very confusing to a child, and it doesn't help with their emotional regulation, with their attachment, and their behavioral impulse control.
Say okay.
The translation app's not working right today, baby.
근데 사실 이것만 믿다 보면
근데 우리는 원래 같이 만날 때도 항상 이렇게 대화를 해왔어.
이거는 머나먼 그냥 타국에서 뭐 그거 영상 통화하고 직접 만나는 거고 완전 틀리잖아 이게.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, it's not impossible for he knows English, I think, pretty well under the circumstances, but there any kind of nuanced conversation they have to communicate through the app. And on one hand, sure, that can work. People have made it work, but it certainly isn't ideal. Relationships are extremely complicated, particularly when you're dealing with two, they have one kid, another kid's on the way, different cultures, they're going to have to move and live together. There's just a lot of things to communicate about, a lot of things to understand about each other, not only just practically, but also emotionally. And trying to communicate through an app is extremely cumbersome. And I guess that's the whole premise of this show, is that you have people from different cultures coming together, and how do they work that out? But it seems like you're already starting out at a deficit when there's already so many things that you have to overcome in order to make a relationship work. I mean, I haven't commented on this yet. They have essentially only spent 3 weeks together in person. And this show will often have relationships like that. Not always, but sometimes there will be extremely limited amount of in-person time. And although you can certainly communicate a lot over text and video, but it's not the same. And I think the show highlights how the relationship over text and the relationship over video is extremely different, usually a lot more positive, and doesn't have any of the stress of everyday life, because you don't text someone or you don't video chat someone until things are calm in the day, and then you actually meet in a real person and instantly everything's different and there's all this conflict. And it just highlights this importance, I think, that before you engage in unprotected sex or you engage in marriage or being engaged, that you take some time to make sure that you are compatible and that you get along and that you can communicate.
Here, sweetie. You gotta swallow.
Okay, all done.
I just.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm messed up.
I just spilled that everywhere.
Okay, so maybe this is a omen of things to come, that he is trying to make a romantic gesture. He is trying to have a proposal that goes well, and it doesn't go well. And all the process, he almost knocks over the table. Deavan spills her water. Deavan has to help, and then for Jihoon, he is apologizing. I've started to notice there's a lot of apologizing that he's doing. Now, on one hand, we might be seeing some personality trait in him about apologizing, which we'll keep an eye on. Another thing is that it could be a cultural manifestation. I'm Japanese, which is very different from Korean culture, but there can be in some Japanese behavior and Japanese American, which I am, a lot of apologizing when you might not necessarily be very sorry. Well, what would be the way to say it? That when you have disappointed people, as a Japanese American, which I can speak to, it's extremely important that you humbly apologize, that you do not blame other people. Now, Japanese American people can be extremely mean individuals as well. It's not like they're always universally nice, but there's a greater cultural emphasis on I have shamed myself, or I have wronged myself, or I have done you wrong, and it's extremely impolite, maybe that's the way to put it, to not apologize a lot, to not say, I am so sorry, please forgive me. And what I find is for mainstream Americans, they're not necessarily that way. That, you know, they might apologize, they might feel bad, but there's not this culture of extreme apology and extreme selflessness. I think maybe that's another part. And I don't know if Korean people are like this too. Let me know in the comments if you know about. I mean, I have a lot of Korean friends, and as a Japanese American, I've grown up with a lot of Korean people. But I imagine that Korean culture is at least closer to Japan culture, Japanese culture, than it is to the white mainstream Utah culture. But anyway, so are we looking at a situation like that where he is just apologizing out of politeness and it's just more polite to apologize a lot? Or has he made a lot of mistakes in his life and he's just very used to apologizing? Because there were times when he was apologizing before this clip where I thought, I don't know if he needs to apologize that much. So let me know in the comments what you think.
Happy. I'm very so nervous.
I don't know. It's interesting to see. It's almost as if he's both clumsy in his physicality as he is in his life. There's a certain clumsiness to him, accident prone. I have a friend actually who's like this, who seemed to get in accidents all the time. Actually, a friend of my brother's was like this too. He was always breaking his bones, and he just got his cast off, and he was being carried by his friends to the car. And the accident-prone guy, he got his toe stuck in a little pipe that was on the ground, and it caused him to fall, and he broke his leg again. So there's certain people that are accident-prone, and maybe Jihoon is sort of like that, not only in his physical life, but also in his relationship life. I don't know. We'll see.
This is my fiancé, Jihoon.
Yeah, this is my fiancé, Deavan. Yeah, congratulations.
So happy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jin. And you did a good job with the ring. So good job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Jihoon is an interesting person. Deavan and Jihoon. I mean, at this point, so I'm guessing the reason why y'all have asked me to watch this couple is because they get into conflict eventually. They really haven't gotten into conflict yet, so I'm enjoying watching them. They seem to be open and non-conflictual. They just spent a week in an Airbnb with the parents, so just imagine another couple on the show having done that. If we saw, Libby and Andre with Libby's parents, for example, in the same house, there would be conflict all day long. But there wasn't, and if there was, they would have shown it, and they haven't shown us any of that. So they successfully stayed in a house with the parents, with his parents. Didn't seem to be any problem. The parents accepted her into the family. They seem a little skeptical, but that's fine. And there's no conflict between the two of them. They're very sweet to each other. One could argue that they just don't really know each other given the language barrier, but at the very least, things seem to be going well. And Deavan seems to be a nice person. Jihoon seems to be a really nice person. So, I'm guessing it'll take a turn for the worse at some point, but I'm enjoying it thus far. And so the point is there's a lot of strengths that we can see. We don't see things that we see in other couples, right? where you assume the worst of each other, or you get really angry when, Deavan, for example, was really wanting the parents to approve of her. There are these limbo spaces where she's in, where she's like, do they like me? Do they approve of me? Are they? And there are signals she's getting from them that maybe they don't approve of me. And we've seen other couples on the show where the person in Devan's position will come out strong and get real angry. And how dare you? This is America, and you're gonna. And she didn't do any of that. So in the absence of those things, there must be some level of self-esteem, or they work well together. So I want to commend that.
It happened.
I think most very dumb propose
I thought it was perfect, but whatever.
broken cup, but I'm so happy. Devan say yes.
So again, I don't know if it's a language difference. I'm sure there's something there, but in his language, he is putting himself down a lot. He's saying, I think that was the worst proposal of all time. It'd be one thing to say, yeah, I made a mistake. So what's going on there? Is it that he truly does he truly believe that, and he has a lot of low self-esteem? Is he saying that as a way of fishing for Devan to say, no, it was great? Is he trying to do something? Is it a language difference? What's the deal? Let's keep an eye on that as we move forward. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.